The release and initial chaos, 2017, Mega Knight. When this thing dropped in September 2017, it literally changed the entire game overnight. Supercell released it as a legendary card with one job: stop all those annoying swarm decks everyone was spamming. You know the ones. Goblin Gang everywhere, Skeleton Army in every match, Minion Horde filling the sky, just cheap cycle nonsense all over the place. The meta back then was all about spamming cheap troops and overwhelming your opponent with numbers. Mega Knight was supposed to be the answer. Drop it on a push, watch everything explode, problem solved. Simple, right? Except Supercell made it way too good. Like, way too good. Within weeks of release, if you had Mega Knight, you basically won. If you didn't have it, you basically lost. It was that simple and that broken. The card could land on a 15 elixir push that your opponent spent forever building up and just completely delete the entire thing in 1 second. Spawn jump hits everything grouped up, regular attacks clean up whatever somehow survived, and suddenly your opponent's entire offense that they carefully built is just gone for only 7 elixir. That's not balance, that's just broken. Reddit absolutely lost its mind when this card came out. Every other post was someone screaming about how broken it was, forums filled up with complaint threads, YouTube videos everywhere about Mega Knight being the most overpowered card ever released. And honestly, they were completely right. The card forced everyone to completely rebuild their decks from scratch. You had 2 options and only 2 options. Either you played Mega Knight yourself, or you played something specifically designed to counter Mega Knight. There was literally no in-between, no third option, no other viable strategy. The problem wasn't even just that it was strong. Clash Royale has had strong cards before, plenty of them throughout the years. The real problem was that Mega Knight fundamentally changed deck building. You couldn't just adapt your strategy a little bit, you had to throw out your entire deck concept and start over. If you didn't have Mini P.E.K.K.A. or Inferno Dragon or some other hard counter ready to go at all times, you just lost. Period. One single card controlled the entire meta and killed all the deck diversity that makes the game interesting. And spoiler alert, Supercell tried to fix this mess for literal years and never really pulled it off. The balance change. Roller Coaster, 2018 to 2023. So Supercell looked at this complete disaster of a card release and thought, okay, we messed up, but we can fix this with some balance changes, just tweak some numbers, adjust some stats, find that sweet spot. Easy, right? Spoiler, it was not easy. In fact, it was impossible. Between 2018 and 2023, they kept tweaking Mega Knight over and over and over. They nerfed damage trying to make it less oppressive. They buffed health trying to make it viable competitively. They adjusted deployment time. They changed interactions. They tried everything they could think of. But here's the absolutely hilarious part that shows why this card is fundamentally broken. Every single time they nerfed Mega Knight, top players and competitive pros stopped using it completely. Grand Challenge usage, gone. Dropped to basically nothing. Top ladder above 8,000 trophies disappeared completely. Ultimate Champion leaderboards, you'd never see it. The card became completely unviable at high skill levels. But mid-ladder between 5,000 and 12,000 trophies, still absolutely everywhere. Like literally nothing changed at those ranges. Usage rates barely moved, people were still facing it constantly, still complaining about it constantly, still getting destroyed by it constantly. Why did this happen? 2 main reasons that perfectly show the design problem. First reason, overleveling still made Mega Knight work really well at mid-ladder even with nerfed stats. A level 14 Mega Knight against level 11 or level 12 counters is still going to completely destroy you even if the base stats got nerfed. The level advantage is just too big. And mid-ladder is where overleveling happens the most because players are still upgrading their cards, still figuring out what to focus on, still dealing with uneven progression. Second reason, most players at mid-ladder ranges don't even know the proper counters exist. They don't know about kiting mechanics, they don't know about King Tower activation with Ice Spirit, they don't know optimal building placements, they're still learning the game, so when the stats got nerfed, it didn't matter to them because they weren't exploiting the card's weaknesses anyway. The nerfs only affected players who already knew how to beat it, which made it worse at high level while keeping it oppressive at low level. Then the opposite happened whenever Supercell buffed Mega Knight. Every time they increased stats trying to bring it back into competitive viability, mid-ladder got even worse. More people started using it because it got stronger. More frustration, more Reddit posts, more complaints everywhere. Players who were already tilted facing it in 40% of their matches were now facing it in 50% or 60% of their matches. The experience became even more miserable. But guess what? The buffs still weren't good enough for competitive play. Pros still ignored it completely, the card still didn't show up in top decks or tournaments, because the fundamental design problem remained unchanged. You can buff the stats all you want, but if the card only works when your opponent plays badly, it's never going to be competitive where opponents don't play badly. Turns out you can't fix a card that only functions when your opponent doesn't know what they're doing. That's not a balance problem you can solve with number adjustments. That's a fundamental design problem baked into the card's entire identity. And Supercell basically admitted they had no idea how to fix this when they did something absolutely wild in 2024. The Evolution Experiment 2024. Okay, so Supercell looked at literally years and years of community complaints, looked at all the balance change failures, looked at the impossible situation they created, and decided the solution was make it stronger. I'm not joking. I'm not exaggerating. Evolution Mega Knight came out in 2024 with way more health than base Mega Knight, way more damage on every hit, and faster attack speed. The community immediately went, "Are you actually serious right now? What are you doing?" Because think about it. If base Mega Knight was already ruining the mid-ladder experience for millions of players, if it was already showing up in half of all matches at certain trophy ranges, if it was already driving people crazy with frustration, then giving it massive stat boosts and calling it an evolution was going to make the problem 10 times worse. Everyone saw this coming from a mile away, and guess what? They were absolutely right. Evolution Mega Knight usage spiked hard the moment it released. Win rates jumped across multiple trophy ranges. The card was suddenly even more dominant than base Mega Knight ever was. Reddit completely exploded with complaint posts. Every other post was "This card is cancer," or "Supercell learned absolutely nothing from the last 8 years," or "I'm quitting the game if this doesn't get nerfed." People posting screenshots of facing Evolution Mega Knight 6 matches in a row, 7 matches in a row, just completely unable to escape it. Even the players who spent years defending base Mega Knight and saying just learn to counter it were like, okay, yeah, this is too much, this crossed the line. Even I have to admit, this is broken. The extra stats made it survive interactions it shouldn't survive, made it kill troops it shouldn't be able to kill, made defensive drops even more oppressive than they already were. The card became genuinely unbeatable at mid-ladder unless you had very specific counters that were also properly leveled. Supercell had to nerf Evolution Mega Knight within just a few months of release, and that almost never happens with new card releases or evolutions. Usually Supercell waits at least an entire season, sometimes 2 or 3 seasons before touching anything new. They like to see how the meta develops, gather data, let things settle. But Evolution Mega Knight was so absurdly broken, and the community backlash was so nuclear that they had no choice but to act fast. The game was legitimately becoming unplayable at certain trophy ranges. This whole Evolution Mega Knight disaster proved beyond any doubt that Supercell never understood the actual core problem with the card. They looked at Mega Knight struggling at competitive levels and thought, oh, the card just needs more power, more stats, more damage, and health. When the real answer was, the card needs completely different mechanics entirely. Not bigger numbers on the same broken mechanics, but fundamentally different mechanics that work at all skill levels. But that would mean admitting they got the design wrong from the very start back in 2017. It would mean admitting 8 years of balance changes didn't fix anything. So instead, they just made a stronger version of the same problem and hoped it would somehow work out differently. It didn't. But even with all these changes over the years, all the nerfs and buffs and evolution experiments, the core design stayed broken. And that's where it gets really bad and really obvious that this card can never be fixed. Why the design is fundamentally broken. Here's why Supercell genuinely cannot fix this card no matter what they try. Mega Knight is at its core a defensive card that only works properly if your opponent makes specific mistakes. That's it. That's the entire card concept. The whole thing is designed around punishing bad play. It punishes players who group their troops together in tight formations. It punishes overcommitting Elixir on one big push. It rewards you for playing reactively and just waiting for your opponent to push first so you can drop Mega Knight on top of everything. But here's the massive fundamental problem with that design. Skilled players don't make those mistakes. Good players space their troops out properly, so splash damage doesn't hit multiple things. They know how to kite expensive tanks away from their towers using cheap troops. They understand proper timing and how to play around predictable mechanics. So everything that makes Mega Knight strong and oppressive becomes completely useless once you're facing players who understand basic game mechanics. Look at the actual usage statistics by trophy range, and this becomes painfully obvious. At mid-later, between 5,000 and 12,000 trophies, Mega Knight absolutely dominates the meta. We're talking 70% usage rates at 5,000 to 6,000 trophies. That means 7 out of every 10 players at that range are using Mega Knight. 40 to 50% usage rates around 8,000 to 12,000 trophies. Almost half of all matches feature this one card. Players at these levels panic when they see the Mega Knight spawn animation. They don't know Ice Spirit can activate King Tower. They don't know kiting mechanics exist. They group their troops because they don't understand spacing yet. So Mega Knight just completely rolls over them every single time. But at Ultimate Champion, where the absolute best players in the entire game compete, under 2% usage, less than 2 out of every 100 players use it. 0 representation in the top 20 meta decks. Literally 0. Competitive tier lists rank it as F tier, which is the absolute worst possible tier. The exact same card, same stats, same mechanics, same everything, but completely dominant at one level and completely useless at another level. You literally cannot balance a card for both skill levels at the same time when the mechanics that make it work at low skill become massive liabilities at high skill. It's too expensive at 7 elixir for fast cycle metas. It's too slow and predictable when everyone knows exactly how it moves. Everything about it gets exploited by good players. The design is fundamentally cooked and there's no fixing it without completely changing what the card does. And the worst part? Supercell absolutely knows this, but they're completely trapped by their own decisions from 2017. The unbalanceable problem, present day. Right now, in December 2025, Season 78, Mega Knight exists in the worst possible position, and it's never getting out. The current win rates sit at 51% to 52% across most game modes. That's literally a coin flip. Completely average. Neither good nor bad. Overall ladder usage is 1.92%, which is pretty low for such a well-known and recognizable card. It's not good enough to be competitive or meta at high levels, but it's also not bad enough to warrant emergency buffs or major changes. And Supercell hasn't touched the card at all in recent balance patches. They're just leaving it exactly where it is indefinitely. Why would they do that? Because literally any change whatsoever in any direction makes half the player base absolutely furious. They're trapped in an impossible situation. Check this out. If they buff Mega Knight in any way, mid-ladder players who are already facing it in 40% to 50% of their matches will completely lose their minds. Those players are already frustrated beyond belief at how repetitive and annoying the meta feels. Making Mega Knight even stronger would make their entire gameplay experience absolutely miserable. They would quit the game or at minimum stop spending any money on it. The Reddit backlash would be nuclear. The negative reviews would flood in. But if Supercell nerfs Mega Knight instead, the small percentage of competitive players who still manage to use it in very specific niche decks would get their entire archetype completely deleted from the game. Those players already know the card is weak at high level. They've built specialized decks around making Mega Knight work despite all its problems. A nerf would take it from barely viable in specific situations to literally unplayable everywhere. Those competitive players would be furious about destroying their deck investments. And then there's the third option, completely rework the card. Change what its mechanics actually do, rather than just adjusting damage and health numbers. But that option requires Supercell to publicly admit years and years of design failure. It means standing up and saying we got this card wrong from the very beginning in 2017, and 8 years of balance changes didn't fix the problem. That's a huge embarrassing admission for a company. Plus, it would make players angry who spent tons of gold, wildcards, and even real money leveling up Mega Knight to max level. Those players would feel cheated if the card they invested in got fundamentally changed into something different. So what does Supercell actually do? Absolutely nothing at all. The card just sits in this mediocre limbo state forever. F tier ranking for competitive players who know it's garbage, but still oppressive and frustrating for casual mid-ladder players who face it constantly. Neither group is happy about the situation, but Supercell has decided that keeping both groups moderately unhappy is better than making one group extremely angry. This is exactly what happens when you ship a fundamentally flawed design and then never properly fix it because fixing it is too difficult or expensive or embarrassing. The card becomes unbalanceable by literal definition. Its win condition is opponent incompetence. And you cannot balance a competitive game around incompetence because incompetence is not a consistent variable. So how does the actual community feel about this entire mess? Oh man, they are massively divided. The great community divide. If this is making sense so far, hit that subscribe button real quick. Ask 10 different Clash Royale players about Mega Knight and you will get 10 completely different answers, and literally all of them will be angry. The split is almost perfectly clean by trophy range. It's actually kind of impressive how divided the community is. Below 12,000 trophies, the overwhelming consensus is that Mega Knight is broken, unfair, requires zero skill to use, and ruins the entire game. Players at these levels think the card is the worst thing Supercell ever added. Above 12,000 trophies, the consensus completely flips in the opposite direction. Players at high levels think complaining about Mega Knight is proof you're bad at the game and need to learn basic mechanics. Both sides are 100% convinced they're objectively correct. Both sides think the other side is completely delusional and wrong. Mid-ladder Reddit posts like "Mega Knight is unbearable" get 253 upvotes with hundreds and hundreds of comments all agreeing with the frustration. Players in those threads call it cancer repeatedly. They say it creates zero variety in the meta because they see it so incredibly often. They describe it as one size fits all because it works on defense regardless of what deck you're playing or what you're pushing with. They claim it lets mediocre players who don't understand the game carry to victory without needing any actual skill or game knowledge. One specific player named Polly from Arena 13 made a genuine post asking for help dealing with Mega Knight. She explained that the card felt incredibly annoying and low skill to play against. She didn't have Mini P.E.K.K.A. or other hard counters properly leveled up yet because she was still working on upgrading her main deck. Every single match against Mega Knight felt completely impossible. She wasn't being toxic or salty, she genuinely wanted advice on how to deal with it. And here's the thing, she's not wrong to feel that way. When you're facing the same card in 40% to 50% of your matches and you don't have the specific knowledge or card levels needed to counter it properly, that experience genuinely sucks. The frustration is completely real and valid. These aren't salty kids being toxic after losing a few matches. These are real people genuinely struggling against something that dominates their entire gameplay experience at their trophy range. When half your games feature Mega Knight and you don't have the tools to deal with it yet, the anger and frustration make complete sense. But according to high-level players and pros, all of this is just a skill issue, and you need to get good. The pro player perspective. The pros and high-level players have absolutely zero sympathy for anyone struggling with Mega Knight, and they are not subtle or polite about expressing that opinion. High-level players see Mega Knight as literally one of the easiest cards in the entire game to counter. To them, it's not a threat, it's a free win. They treat it like a basic skill check card. If you can't beat Mega Knight, you simply haven't learned fundamental game mechanics yet. That's their perspective. Reddit comments from top ladder players are absolutely brutal about this. If you complain about Mega Knight, you're bad at the game. Skeletons deal with him easily. It's weak at high levels, just climb out of mid ladder. Skill issue, get good. They genuinely cannot understand why anyone would struggle against this card. To them, it seems completely obvious and easy. And from their perspective, the actual statistical numbers prove them completely right. Ultimate champion usage sits under 2%. Zero representation in the top 20 meta decks. F-tier rankings from every competitive source and tier lists. Pros can kite Mega Knight to their King Tower using just one Elixir Skeletons for a massive activation advantage. They can counter it with Mini P.E.K.K.A. costing only 4 Elixir for a huge positive Elixir trade. They can largely ignore it because it doesn't threaten their towers fast enough to matter. Facing an opponent who plays Mega Knight is basically a guaranteed free win for them. When someone posts on Reddit asking for help dealing with Mega Knight, the responses from high-level players are literally just skill issue, or learn to play, or stop being bad. They're technically correct about the statistics. The card genuinely is weak at high-level competitive play, but they're completely missing all the context of why it feels strong and oppressive at lower levels. They're missing the level advantages that exist at mid-ladder, the knowledge gaps that haven't been filled yet, the mechanical skill differences. They're right about the raw numbers, but completely wrong about understanding the actual player experience. And here's the absolutely wild part about this whole community divide: they're both right. Both sides are correct from their own perspectives. Why both sides are right. The reason this argument never ends, the reason both sides just keep screaming at each other forever, is because both sides are genuinely playing completely different games with the exact same card. They're not even in the same meta. They're in completely separate game environments that happen to use the same cards. Mid-ladder players face Mega Knight in an environment where overleveling is absolutely rampant everywhere you look, where counter knowledge is extremely limited because players are still learning, where defensive mistakes happen constantly because mechanical skill is still developing. In this specific environment and context, a level 14 Mega Knight against level 11 or level 12 counters is genuinely oppressive and unfair. When you don't even know that Ice Spirit can activate King Tower, when you don't know kiting mechanics exist, the card feels completely unbeatable. And the 70% usage rate at 5,000 to 6,000 trophies proves this isn't just perception or people being salty. The card actually does dominate at those ranges. The statistics back up the experience. Top players and pros face Mega Knight in a completely different environment. Card levels are perfectly equal in challenges and at top ladder. Every single player knows all the optimal counters by heart. Nobody makes basic spacing mistakes anymore because mechanical skill is extremely high. In this completely different context and environment, the exact same card becomes a massive liability instead of a strength. 7 elixir cost in a cycle meta where top decks average 3.1 to 3.9 elixir is way too expensive. It's slow, predictable, easy to counter for massive positive elixir trades. The under 2% usage rate at Ultimate Champion proves it's not viable there. Both realities are statistically true and factually accurate because they exist in fundamentally different competitive environments with different skill levels and different game knowledge. This is not a case of one group being right and one group being wrong. This is a case of Clash Royale's matchmaking and progression system creating completely separate metas where the exact same card performs totally differently. Mega Knight is simultaneously broken and trash. It's both overpowered and underpowered. It just depends entirely on which version of the game you're personally playing. And Season 78's meta makes this even more obvious. The current meta is completely dominated by super fast cycle decks. Evolution Drill Cycle at 3.1 average elixir with 57% win rates. Hog Freeze and Hog Hunter both sitting at 3.3 average elixir with 55% to 58% win rates. All of these meta decks absolutely destroy Mega Knight because they cycle through their cards faster than Mega Knight can possibly respond, and they punish that expensive 7 elixir cost relentlessly. But those top tier decks require significant game knowledge and mechanical skill to play properly. At mid-ladder, where that knowledge and skill don't exist yet, Mega Knight still completely rules the meta. And this massive split in community experience and card performance reveals something way bigger about how Supercell intentionally designs certain cards. The design philosophy problem. Here's the uncomfortable truth: Mega Knight is not a mistake. It's not an accident. It's not a card that Supercell accidentally made poorly. It's a completely intentional and deliberate design choice that Supercell keeps repeating over and over with multiple different cards. Cards like Mega Knight, Electro Giant, and Elite Barbarians all share the exact same underlying design philosophy. High visual impact and effectiveness for low mechanical skill, easily countered by game knowledge and experience. These types of cards exist specifically to let newer players and casual players get wins and feel successful without needing to understand advanced game mechanics yet. It keeps casual engagement levels high. Players feel like they're winning and progressing even when they don't fully understand the game's deeper systems yet. From a game design and player retention perspective, this makes sense. But it creates an absolutely terrible learning curve and player progression experience. Players get stuck relying on these crutch cards that completely stop working once they climb high enough to face competent opponents. They hit this massive brick wall where their main strategy suddenly becomes useless and they have to completely relearn how to play the game. It's a frustrating and confusing experience. And here's the thing, Supercell has never removed or fundamentally reworked any of these cards despite literal years of community complaints and feedback. Instead, they just release evolution versions with higher stats, create seasonal variants, make minor stat adjustments in balance patches. All of these approaches maintain the exact same problematic core design. They never actually fix the fundamental issue. The business reason for this is pretty obvious when you think about it. Casual players make up the vast majority of the total player base. They're also the primary source of monetization revenue through card upgrades, Pass Royale purchases, and gem spending. Designing cards that work specifically well at mid-ladder, trophy ranges keeps those players engaged, active, and spending money. The frustrated players on the receiving end of these cards also spend resources and money to level up counters. It's actually profitable from both directions. Mid-ladder focused cards drive engagement, which drives spending. Both the Mega Knight users spend to level it up, and the frustrated victims spend to level up counters. The frustration itself becomes part of the monetization loop. This means these design problems are completely permanent by intentional design. Supercell will not fix these cards because fixing them would mean publicly admitting their entire design philosophy creates negative player experiences, and that philosophy is far too profitable to abandon or change. 7 years after Mega Knight's release in 2017, the card is still fundamentally the same. no complete rework, no mechanical changes, just minor stat adjustments here and there. Supercell has access to all the data showing the community split and the usage disparities and the years of negative sentiment. They choose to do absolutely nothing about it because the current state is working exactly as intended from a business perspective. So, if you're still getting destroyed by Mega Knight every match, here's what you actually need to know to escape that trap. Why everyone gets stuck. There's a specific reason why mid-ladder players struggle against Mega Knight for literal months while pros laugh at it. One group learned something crucial that the other group hasn't discovered yet. King Tower activation changes absolutely everything about how you deal with Mega Knight. When Mega Knight jumps across the bridge toward your towers, you drop a 1 elixir Ice Spirit or Skeletons near your King Tower. Not at the bridge, not in the middle of the arena, but specifically near your actual King Tower in the back. Mega Knight will target that cheap troop and jump directly on it. When Mega Knight's jump damage hits that troop near your King Tower gets activated and wakes up. Now you have 3 towers shooting at threats instead of just 2 for the entire rest of the match. You just turn their 7 elixir investment into a permanent tactical advantage for yourself that lasts the whole game. But here's the problem. The game never explicitly tells you this mechanic exists. The in-game tutorial covers very basic stuff. How to place troops on the arena, how to use spell cards, general attacking and defending concepts, but advanced mechanics like kiting, optimal building placements, and King Tower activation tricks, those are never explained anywhere in the actual game. You're expected to figure them out yourself through trial and error or by looking up guides and videos online. Reddit is completely full of players discovering King Tower activation after playing hundreds and hundreds of matches, and they all say the exact same thing. I wish someone had told me this sooner. One specific Arena 13 player reported being stuck at that trophy range for literal months, constantly losing to Mega Knight and feeling completely helpless. Then they watched one YouTube video that explained the Ice Spirit King Tower activation trick. They instantly climbed 1,000 trophies just from learning that single mechanic. Just one piece of knowledge completely changed their entire experience. Other counters work effectively too once you know about them. Mini P.E.K.K.A costs only 4 elixir and kills Mega Knight in exactly 4 hits for a huge positive elixir trade. Inferno Dragon melts Mega Knight in just a few seconds. Defensive buildings like Cannon or Tesla make Mega Knight lock onto them and die before ever reaching your towers. Even cheap swarm cards reset Mega Knight's jump animation and chip away at its health for very low elixir costs. Once you internalize and learn these counter mechanics, Mega Knight completely stops being scary or threatening. You'll naturally climb past the trophy ranges where it's super common, not because the card itself somehow got weaker or changed, but because you learned what most other players at that trophy level haven't figured out yet. The card stays exactly the same, you just got better at the game. The final takeaway. This one card shows you absolutely everything you need to know about how Supercell actually views competitive balance versus player engagement and monetization. Mega Knight isn't just a poorly designed card, it's a perfect symbol of design choices that deliberately prioritize short-term player engagement and spending over long-term competitive health and game balance. The card exists specifically to give casual players easy wins and make them feel successful. It keeps mid-ladder trophy ranges populated and active. It drives frustrated players to spend resources leveling up counter cards. The fact that Mega Knight is completely useless and unviable at high competitive levels genuinely does not matter to Supercell's business model, because the vast majority of players never reach those high competitive levels anyway. 7 full years after the original release in September 2017, the card is still fundamentally the same. No complete mechanical rework, no changes to how it actually functions, just minor stat adjustments that maintain the exact same status quo. Supercell has access to all the usage data, all the community feedback, all the complaints. They can clearly see the community split between trophy ranges, the massive usage differences, the years of negative sentiment. They know mid-ladder players hate the card and think it ruins the game. They know competitive players think it's trash tier. They deliberately choose to do absolutely nothing about any of this because the current state is working exactly as intended from a business and engagement perspective. Mega Knight makes money by being exactly what it currently is. It's a trap that catches players who don't know better yet. It's a frustration engine that keeps engagement levels high and drives upgrade spending. If you're frustrated by facing Mega Knight constantly, that frustration is completely valid and real. It's also exactly what Supercell designed the card to create as part of their engagement and monetization systems. The card is not worse than you think. It's actually worse than Supercell will ever publicly admit. Because admitting the truth would mean fundamentally changing a highly profitable system. The design is broken. The balance is genuinely impossible. The community will stay divided forever. All because one card from 2017 was never designed to work at every skill level. It was designed to work exactly where it currently works, keeping casual players engaged in spending while being completely irrelevant to competitive play. That's not a bug in the system. That's the intentional feature.